statements, motion statement, and preprocessor statements. So let's start with some geometrical statement to get with it more familiar, right? So first start with the geometrical statements. First is geometrical statements. Now these geometrical statements are basically related to the geometry of design of a product. So first of all, need to study the design of a product, where the points are located, where the lines are located, where the planes are located. Getting me or not? Then we need to give the symbols of each geometrical entities in form of points, lines, complete circle, ellipse, planes, and so on. So let's see how we can give the different symbols in APT part programming contest, or we call it as a syntax coding. So first we'll start with that we have seen in last lecture that if I want to give the point indication, point symbol, I consider point P1, and that point P1 I can give the syntax coding in APT part programming as follows: point POINT. Just we need to be write down in simple English term, and this point location in form of coordinates like x, y, and z coordinate. So we need to be write down the x coordinate, then comma y coordinate, and comma z coordinate. Why we need to be write down the x coordinate, y coordinate, z coordinate? That we have seen in previous lecture that APT part programming is in a 3D space language. Getting me or not? So we need to be mention x coordinate, y coordinate, and z coordinate simultaneously. Now for example, a point at the center of a circle. So how we can denote it, or how we can write down it? For example, P2 is a point which is lies at the center of a circle. Getting me or not? So we can write down it simply. First, the English term, that is a point spelling. Then the point is lies at the center of the circle. Then we need to be write down the center and where it lies at a point C1 or at a circle C1, that indicates C1 circle, like this way. Now what is the interpretation of that syntax coding? That is a point at the center of circle. Now for example, a point which is found due to the intersection of two lines. For example, line L1 and line L2 get intersect and form a point that we call it as the intersection point. Now how we can write down it? Let's see. If a point P3 is formed due to the intersection of two lines L1 and L2, so we can write down it simply point POINT. Then we need to be write down specifically intersection of. So we just write down in form of informatic form intersection. So for intersection we need to be write down just INT, and off for it is OF. So int of which line get intersect? L1 comma L2. So what is the interpretation of this complete syntax coding is that the point at intersection of line L1 and L2. Point at intersection of line L1 and L2, like this way. Now, for example, a point get intersection of line L1 and circle L1 where the x coordinate has the higher value. Getting me or not? So how we can write down it? Let's see. Just erase it first. Now, for example, point P4 get intersected due to a line L1 and a circle L1. So we need to be just write down point 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 slash the maximum value of this intersection point of x coordinate is a maximum value. So we need to be write down it as a x large. That is, x value is a largest value as compared to the y value and the z value. Large, comma, intersection for it is that we have seen in previous example, INT OF, intersection of, what is the intersection of L1 comma C1. Now what is the C1? C1 is a circle and L1 is a line which get intersect with the circle which forms a point P4. Getting me or not? So what is the interpretation of that particular syntax coding is that point at intersection of line L1 and circle C1 where x coordinate has the highest value. Getting me or not? Right? Now the next example, the point at the intersection of a circle C1 and C2, but the small value of x coordinate. Now the small value of x coordinate will to be indicate like x value that we have been indicated in the last example as a large value. So here the P5 is a point which is formed due to the intersection of a circle C1 and C2. So just need to be write down as we have write in previous example. P5 is equals to point 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 and the y value is the smallest value, so we need to be write down capital Y and small value of y, which is get formed due to the intersection of what? Intersection of circle C1 and C2. Circle C1. So we need to be write down comma int OF, int of, and comma C1 comma C2. The C1 represents the circle C1 and C2 represents the circle C2. So that is all about the point representation in geometrical coding that basically carried out in APT part project. That is the simple type of coding meant to be carried out with the help of geometrical type of coding. That's all about the points. Now let's see how we can write down the line coding, line syntax coding in APT part program. So just I need to erase it. So let's start with the line coding. Now how we can write down the line coding? For example, a line get passed through. We all know about the line get formed in between a 2 points, starting point and the end point. So how we can write down it? When a line get passed through a point P1 and P2. So let's start writing about it. First we need to write down the symbol of it. L1, the line 1 get passed through the point P1 and P2. So the line, then where it get passed? From P1 and P2. P1, comma, P2. Now what is the interpretation of that syntax coding is that line pass, line passing through point P1 P1 and P2. Like this way. If I want to write down a line, L2 is parallel with line L1, but line passed through point P2. That is the condition. And how we can write down it? Like this way. L2 is a line which is a parallel to line L1, but only when the L2 get passed through a point P2. So write down line, then it passed through the point P2, comma. Now for the parallel word, we need to be just write down P-A-R-L-E-L. P-A-R-L-E-L. Parallel. This is not an exact spelling in English term, but we need to be write down in syntax coding in form of APT part program that we need to memorize only. Right? So the line L2 is passed through point P2 is get parallel with the line L1. So we need to be write down the line L1 over here. Okay? And need to place a comma in between the parallel and L1. Right? Now for example, now what is the interpretation of that particular syntax coding is that L2 line is parallel with L1 line and it passed through the point P2. Okay. Now let's see the next example where the L3 line is get tangent with L2 line and it get passed through a point P1 and it forms an angle and the line get forms the angle of 90 degree. So we need to be write down as, for example, L3, so needs to be erase it first. So line L3 is a symbol of the line which is get form an angle with a different line. That line we are considering is L2. For example, it's not a tangent. We consider it as form an angle of 60 degree. That how we can write down it. Let's see. Line slash it passes through point P1, comma, and it get forms an angle of 60 degree at angle. So we need to be write down just at angle, AT-A-N-G-L. Not an exact English term, but we need to be write down, we need to be memorize that word as it is. So what angle it get forms? 60 degree angle it get forms. And to which line? To the L2 line. Okay. So what is the interpretation of that particular syntax coding is that the L3 line is get form a 60 degree angle which pass through the point P1. Right. Now let's see the next example where the L4 line is get form a angle of minus 120 degree and it get passed through a point P1. Right? So the L4 line get passed from a point, which point? P1, and forms at what? And forms what angle? At angle minus 120 degree. To which line? To which line it forms an angle? That is L2. Now what is the interpretation? Line L4 passes through point P1 and it forms an angle of minus 120 degree to a line L2. Right? Okay. Now The next example, the line is parallel to line L3 and offset by 10 mm towards a y large coordinate. Now, what is it? For example, L5 line is a parallel with L3 line, which x coordinate is a larger coordinate as compared to y x coordinate, y coordinate, z coordinate. Getting me or not? So how we can write down it? Let's see. L5 is equals to line parallel. So previously we have write down how we can write down the parallel syntax. Just we need to be memorize it when we write down it in repetitive manner. So parallel is write down as a P-A-R-L-E-L, parallel. Then to which line? L3 line it is parallel, and its y coordinate is large. What is the y coordinate of it? The 10. So this is the simple way to write down the geometrical coding in APT part programming method, right? Okay. Now let's see how we can write down the different circle codings. Circle. Now what is the circle? A circle which is formed due to a center and due to a radius of that particular circle. Now what we require? A center point and a radius to form a circle, to form a geometrical entity like a complete circle. Getting me or not? For example, a C1 circle is there. We need to create that C1 circle. In APT part program, we need to take the two essential entities like point and the radius of it. So we need to just write down the circle CIRCLE circle. Then what is the center point of that circle? We should have to be mentioning. Center first. And what is the center? For example, P1 point is the center of it. And what is the radius of it? Just we need to write down radius in capital letter. What is the radius of it? 10 mm, for example. Right? So what is the interpretation of that particular syntax coding is that the circle having center point P1 and radius is 10 mm. Getting me or not? So that is the interpretation of that particular syntax coding. Now let's see a C2 circle with center P1 tangent to line L1, or line L1 is tangent with the circle C2, right? So how we can write down it? Let's see. C2 is a circle. It passes through a center. What is the center? P1. Just need to keep in your mind that you need to just place the commas at the right location every time. Otherwise, it shows the syntax error when we run it on the machines. So the circle get passed through C1. Now it get tangent to a line L1. So we need to write down tan 2. Tan to what? L1 line. Getting me or not? So this is a simple way to write down. Okay. Now next is a circle C3. A circle C3 is passes through point P1, P2 and P3. So just write down circle which having a center P1 and it passes through P1, P2 and P3 like this way. Now let's see the next example of it. A circle passes through the intersection of line L1 and L2 and having a radius 5 mm where the x coordinate is small and y coordinate is also a small, right? So let's write down it. Just need to be erase it first. Now the circle C4 is a circle which passes through the intersection of line L1 and L2. Getting me or not? That means the center of circle is that the intersection point of line L1 and L2. So just need to be write down circle which is passes through the intersection of line L1 and L2 but its x coordinate is small L1 and L2 line where the y coordinate is small and the radius of that circle is 5 mm, for example, like this way. So this is the way to be write down the different way to create a circle geometrical entity in APT part programming method. Now, how to create a plane in APT part programming language? Let's see. Plane. Now first of all we need to be understand how to form a plane. The plane can be formed with the help of number of lines and with the help of number of points. So here we are considering the points. Basically when we consider the points in the syntax coding, it's ultimately by default considered by the software. It's form a line in between number of points. So the plane, if you want to write down a plane, PL, symbol for it, PL1. That is PL1 plane we are taking, which passes through 3 points, P1, P2 and P4. So you just write down PLANE, plane in English terms. And where it passed from P2, P3 and P4, for example, or P1, P2 or P4, maybe. Take any points where you want to pass the plane. Just to mention the point P1, P2 and P4 or P2, P3 or P4. So on. Now let's see the next. So that's all about the geometrical coding, geometrical statements which is basically used in APT part programming, where we have seen the points coding, line coding, circle coding and plane coding. right? Now we need to see, or going to start with the motion statement. Now what is the motion statement? The motion statement which gives the motion to the machine tool or the tool holder to perform a particular machining operations. Now what is the syntax coding statement? The formats of general coding is that motion statements are also called as machine control instructions. Why we call it as a machine control instruction? Because it controls a different motion of the machines like tool holder, spindle and work holders. Getting me or not? The general format for APT motion statement is motion. We need to be just write down motion, as we have seen in geometrical statement that we need to be write down first symbol of it. Here we need to be write down motion command. And descriptive data where we need to perform the motion, right? For example, if I want to say that a spindle is go to the point P1 or P2, so we need to be just write down the description of where we need to place the spindle. Okay, so we need to be write down a descriptive data. So let's see how to write down the motion statements in APT part program. So if I want to place a spindle on a point P2, we need to be just write down go to slash P2 point. Getting me or not? Now what is the interpretation of that particular coding is that spindle need to go at point P2. Right? Or when we want to start the spindle from P2 or P1, we need to be write down from P1. The motion statement defines the tool path as per the part geometry specified in the part program. If the moment have to be made in incremental mode, the go DLTA command is used. For example, the statement like go to at a particular location, at a particular path. Getting me or not? So how we can write down it? For to defining a particular path for the motion of a tool is that go DLTA. Where we need to be mention the point location, the x, y and z coordinates 5.0, 4.0 and 3.0, like this way. Now to construct the cutting tool to move from its present position or at a something particular dimension in x direction, particular direction in y direction and a particular direction in z direction in mm. The other common motions commands in APT are as follows, like from P1, go left, go forward, go back, go up, go down. Basically we are instructing with the help of this coding in APT part program to move the spindle from one location to another location in the workpiece, or to move the tool holder or a workpiece holder from one location to another location in machine configuration. Now see what are the different motion statements which are basically used in APT part programming. Most frequently is a from P1. That means we need to be start from P1, that we have seen in previously. Now go past. If I want to go back, I need to just write down go past. Then go left. If I want to move the tool to the left direction, just need to be write down left, LFT, left. If I want to move the tool forward, so we need to be just write down FRW, forward, go forward. If I want to move the tool or workpiece holder to backward location, so I need to be just write down back. If I want to write down the upward movement of a tool, so we need to be write down go and like this way. If I want to move the tool downward direction, we need to be write down DWN, down. So this is all about the motion statement. In next lecture, we will see the part processor statement. Thank you very much for joining me on my YouTube channel. Thank you.